We start by a problem. We define a very clear problem with our pharma partners, so you actually have market validation from day one that there's a need for the technology that will solve this challenge. And we reach out and proactively identify scientific and technological talented people in that specific area, invite them to test us out, and they ultimately pitch to our investment committee, where the winner of that workshop ultimately gets a $1 million pre-seed investment to create a new startup.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Healthtech Podcast. With me today, I'm joined by Mati Gill, and he's CEO of AION Labs, which is a first of its kind venture studio. So they comprise global pharma technology and investment leaders, and they bring all those people together, united in a mission. And what they do is they create and adopt new AI technologies that transform drug discovery and development for the benefit of everyone worldwide. Exciting stuff. Mati, welcome to the Healthtech Podcast. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good. Thank you, James. Very excited.
Thank you. Yes. Looking forward to getting into it. We were just saying, weren't we, that we're both at Health, the conference, but didn't manage to bump into each other there. Did you enjoy it? How was it for you?
The two of us and 3,000 of our closest friends. But yes, I did have a good time there. It was a very dynamic, fascinating conference. And enjoyed very much seeing a lot of good people. You know, the one thing, James, I'll say that is very interesting about the health tech industry, I'm not sure how that is true for every industry, but in health tech, it really attracts very good people, very interesting people, very smart people, but also good people that want to do good for humanity. So it's a lot of fun being able to be at a family reunion of such for a day and be able to see and meet some good people. The only regret I have usually is you can't meet everyone, right? You can't spend time spending time with everyone. So we didn't even get the chance to meet you and I, but at least we have a podcast.
I totally agree, and it did have that family vibe to it, didn't it? I think they're very good at putting on like the social stuff. So you can go for a run and chat to people, you can be over a drink or a bit of food at a barbecue, you just get chatting like I guess you would like a barbecue on the street. It's a bit more informal, isn't it? It's just a bit more of the natural conversations take over. You appreciate people for actually being human beings, and you don't talk about work the whole time, do you? So it does actually warm you up to what they have going on in business as well, I guess.
Agree, and I agree with you on the food and drinks and the informality, but I do run a lot, but I always run alone. My only running partner is my dog, Jesse. That's it. Yeah. Running is a form of meditation, at least for me in that sense. So I can listen to a podcast, but it's really the time that I'm able to do something non-precise, non-scientific, just get out there, get on the road, and spend an hour with myself. And for me, that's a lot of fun. And the dog does her best to keep up, so she's great.
That says something for how quick you can run if your dog's trying to keep up with you, one of that size. Wow.
It's mainly because of the heat here in Tel Aviv. It's pretty hot.
Yeah. So. Okay. And of course, based in Tel Aviv and Israel. So looking forward to hearing a little bit more about the ecosystem. I was there a few years ago, actually, for one of those big biomedical conferences that they have out there. And I can remember one of the things that really, really hit me about Israel at the time was what I didn't have an appreciation for actually previously. You may or may not agree with this, but the government's involvement in actually fostering that startup world, like the government-funded accelerators. It's a concept that I hadn't really appreciated existed, to be honest. And maybe some of my listeners won't even know this, and we can probably get into it a bit later. But it's a country that's clearly worked really hard to give a good environment and a head start to people who've got the ideas that those accelerators just work with, like the universities. And as soon as those ideas are generated, they're commercialized. And great tech ecosystem, which I'm sure we'll get into in a bit more detail. But before we do, let's get to know you a little bit first. The way we start these episodes is for you to tell your story, Mati, and what a story it is to get to where you are. But how does one become the CEO of AION Labs and sit on multiple boards and have such a life of purpose in health tech, biotech, and pharma like you're doing?
So, James, it's a great intro, I have to say. I've always tried to live my life with three pillars that have guided my major decisions in life. And I think that's how I've been able to get to the place that I am at now. And that's how I'll get to my next stations down the road, 10 to 20 to 30 years from now. And the three pillars are very simple. It's very large strategic decisions about what guides my life. Number one is that I took a decision. We moved here to Israel as a family when I was 12. I was the oldest child out of three. We moved over from Ohio, from the United States. Grew up in Jerusalem. And I took a decision at the age of 20 that my life and the center of my life would be in Israel, out of a deep sense of purpose and belonging, and that this is where I feel my sense of belonging. I love the United States, love traveling the world, would very much entertain living abroad for short periods or a hybrid type of model, but my life is in Israel. This is where I feel that we have a deep sense of belonging, and I've been living here and choosing to live here ever since. Secondly, is the most important thing for me in that sense is my family. So building a family, and I was able to coerce and fool my wife, Chagit, to marry me, and thankfully she did, and we have three amazing children, and even got her to agree to having a dog, so we're raising three amazing children. I'm always amazed at how great they are, and very diverse, very different in their characters. And of course, my parents and my siblings were kind of like a tribe growing here in Israel, and that's really a very important element for me. And I had to pause at some point. At the age of 30, I was struck by a terrorist in a shooting. And the one thing I had thought to myself when I was in a very senior position at the time, so somewhat accomplished as on the career path, which we'll get to in a second, but at some point I just even paused and I said, what is the one thing I would have missed out on not having done had it ended differently? In a more tragic manner than it was, and thankfully it didn't. And that was the family. So I just paused everything and I said, now that's priority number one. Let's make sure I find a partner that I want to spend the rest of my life with and build a family with. And that's obviously something that is today my top priority, making sure that is that family is continuing to grow and to continuing to mature, but also as a priority to spend time with. And the third element is having, like you mentioned before, James, having a career with a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning. I've never had a goal for myself to be rich. That's never been one of my goals, and it still isn't, and it won't be, as far as a motivating factor for myself at least. I am motivated to bring the best out of myself professionally when I have a deep commitment to the purpose that I'm serving. So I've always worked in jobs, whether it was 10 years in public service between my time in the military as well as chief of staff for a minister in the Israeli cabinet and government for a full term. I always worked with a deep sense of purpose in the public sector. But even then, when I moved over to the industry sector to gain skills and to develop my capabilities so that I could actually contribute more in any capacity that I serve in, I decided to move over to the health-tech industry, to the pharma industry, because it really is the only industry out there in the private sector where by doing well, you're doing good by definition. There's no way that we can be successful financially in the pharma industry without having contributed to society. And for me, that's something that is deeply motivating. And so I spent a little over 10 years at Teva Pharmaceuticals, Israel's largest company in general, but also obviously it's the largest company de facto in the life sciences and biotech sector. And I spent a little over 10 years in the management there until I was part of a team that put together the concept and partnership for a new venture studio that would help bring in the capabilities to harness big data-based research, then AI and machine learning and computational technologies to be able to discover, develop, and bring new drugs to the market in a much more precise, efficient, cost-efficient manner, so that ultimately we can bring new hope to patients and be able to make healthcare more accessible worldwide. So that's what I'm doing now, and And I have the fortune of being able to be the CEO of a venture studio where we create startups in the space of technology and AI for drug discovery and development. And we're backed by some amazing group of partners, 4 pharma partners, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Merck, based out of Germany, as well as Teva is Israel's largest company to date, and Amazon on the cloud and computational side as a technology partner, and 2 venture capital firms, as well as, James, what you mentioned, the Israel Innovation Authority, which is the Israeli government agency that really fosters and nurtures and helps to support the growth of the tech sector here in Israel, and is really the backbone of the high-tech sector, which is the backbone of the Israeli economy at this stage. So we have an amazing group of partners. We've created 5 startups to date, in the process of forming 4 more that will be launched by the end of this year. It's been a 2.5-year journey up until now, but we're well on track and very excited about what we're continuing to do here.
Awesome. I have loads of questions for you. First things mentioned, by the way, we've got friends in Akron, Ohio. So yeah, it's part of the world that I do actually know relatively well randomly.
So you're a LeBron James fan, right?
Well, yeah, because of that, I absolutely am. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so yeah, I always say LeBron James should never, ever have to buy another drink in the city of Cleveland and the city of Akron. And I raised my kids knowing who LeBron James is, but still, Michael's the GOAT. With all due respect, Michael's the GOAT.
Yeah, respect where it's due. Absolutely. Yeah. Our friends are out there. My friend's grandfather was one of, I say one of, there were many of them, but one of LeBron's doctors. And he said that, let me tell you a story. So once he went round to LeBron's house to give him an ENT exam because of something or other. And yeah, he turned up and there were just like pizza boxes stacked outside. And he was in there playing computer games with his friends. It was literally just going around to like, young lad in his 20s house, except this house is like 7 times the size of everybody's house.
I've never met LeBron James. That's definitely on my bucket list of people I want to meet and just say thank you, because he gave us a moment in 2016 as Cleveland fans that I never dreamt would be as dramatic. And I was crying. And actually, when we actually won that Game 7 and won the NBA championship in basketball, for those that aren't familiar here, I paused for a second and didn't know how to react, because for those that are familiar, Cleveland sports fans are very used to heartbreak. And my grandfather, who taught us all in our tribe how to be Cleveland sports fans, unfortunately passed away a month before that championship happened. And we won the game, and I called up my father, and he was crying. And he told me, he said, "I can't believe it." And I said, "Dad, I don't know how to react. I know how to react, and I've learned how to react when heartbreak happens. I don't know how to be happy in this sense. I don't know how to react positively to a win." So LeBron James, if you happen to be listening, thank you. And, I could also say it's a very admirable person. The fact that he was able to raise a son that is going to play with him next year in Los Angeles, on the same team with him. I think it's absolutely incredible as a father of kids to have that as a crowning achievement that's worth more than all the MVPs he's won, all the 4 titles he's won. I think that's a really crowning achievement on his legacy that I give him a lot of credit for, that coming from his background, raising such amazing kids and being able to steer them through with absolutely zero controversy on the way. That's something that's very admirable.
It's amazing what sport can do, like what sport can teach us, what sport can show us. I've actually had a few people on this podcast that were, depends on your definition, but elite sports players, like national, international sports players, went into business, and they talk very clearly about all the things that sport taught them. I've had a couple of tennis players on here that have gone on to become like founders of companies because they, to your point, they just get used to losing. And I know, Roger Federer recently did a speech to a university in the US, and he was saying in that, I'm sure it's a speech that a few people have heard. It's done the rounds on the TikTok and all that sort of stuff, but he only won 54% of points in his whole career. So you learn to lose like every other minute you're losing. And yeah, it's interesting what you say, but yeah, once you have that height of success.
I'm a huge baseball fan, and there we say if you hit 300, meaning that you get a hit 30% of the times, you're in the Hall of Fame for your career. And that means that you didn't get a hit 70% of the time.
Yeah, yeah.
On the flip side, that you struck out or didn't get on. And that's something that we should all remember and take proportion with, I think, in that sense as well. You know, in clinical trials, you could say in our space, right? So we say, not many people know this, but when you take a drug that a company has developed in the biotech sector, and you take it through all the processes of finding the target, developing the molecule that can attack it, doing the preclinical studies, both in labs and then in animals afterwards, the chances, once you actually start to test it out on humans, and mind that you've already invested years and millions in the research up until that point, the chance of it actually being able to be approved through all the waves of clinical trials, be approved by the FDA to be administered in patients, is 10%. That's the success rate, right up until now. And we have a 90% failure rate. So if we're actually, and this goes to what we're doing here at AION Labs, if we're actually able to take data with computational technologies and AI that can predict which drug will actually work well and how a trial should be designed, that's where we have a huge opportunity to capture value, and which is why so many companies like our venture studio, but others, are really trying our best to be able to develop technologies that can reduce that failure rate from 90% to something much less. Even if we reduce it to 70% failure rate, that's a huge amount of value.
Yeah, huge. Yeah, you'd see a lot of success if you're able to do that with your venture studio or anything else. Absolutely.
And we'll be in the Hall of Fame. So there you go.
Of course, the Browns to win the Super Bowl next day.
Yeah, I don't think that's happening.
Good to be realistic.
Not in my lifetime, man. Not expecting that.
I want to talk to you about your career a little bit more before we move on to AION Labs. So, amassing the skills and confidence to eventually become a CEO is, well, people do this in different ways, right? So some people raise money when they're, like 19 and start a tech company, call it Facebook, and then just be a CEO, and that's all they ever are. And somehow they have the confidence and ability to work out on the fly, build the parachute on the way down, etc. But others work at it in their career and amass those skills. They do it slightly differently, more akin to what you've done. So can you just plot that route for me through Teva Pharmaceuticals, I guess, and even your early career into there? And I guess the reason I ask, because I think a lot of people will be at the point in their career or their life where they're on a path to something. They want to become a leader. They have a vision for what they want to create in the world and put into the world. And I think in a career, you can often not exactly know how to get there, and everyone's got their own individual story. So if you could go into a bit more detail about yours, to how you now get to the place, because CEO of a venture studio, like, man, if you said that to me when I was just leaving medicine, that I could be the head of an organization that was taking new ideas, putting them into, well, starting companies around them and creating things and building things into the world that can make my job better as a doctor. I mean, literally, that was the absolute dream for me. And I'm sure there's other people thinking similar things. Putting ideas into the world at scale is basically what you're doing. You're picking the world we live in next, etc. I know, often attributed to investors and VCs that, but certainly venture studios the same thing. So yeah, how does one amass the skill and the confidence to eventually become a CEO of a venture studio?
So I think it's a few elements, James, and I'm very fortunate and lucky to be in the role that I'm in. But a position for me is never a goal. A title for me has never been a goal. And to go back to what we were discussing before, I'm in the position I am right now because I feel a deep sense of purpose, both on a national and industry and mission-based statement in what we are doing here. And I walk into my office and into our venture studio every morning with a deep sense of pride that this is what I get to do. And I walk in and our culture is great and our environment is great. And I just smile because I thoroughly enjoy the people I get to work with and the environment I get to work in and the mission that I get to serve. And to get here, to your question, it's really about selecting the industry I want to work in and developing the right skill set and tools to be able to get there. And for me, I'll just give you a different example from earlier in my career. At the age of around 29, 30, when I was finishing up my time as chief of staff for the minister I was working with, again with the same dilemmas with the terrorist attack that I had just been through, I had to take a decision on the next phase of my career because elections were coming. And it was obvious, to me at least, that after the elections, I would have to take a choice whether I was going to stay in my role in a different capacity, go be chief of staff for another minister, and had a very clear path that I could also have a political career and be elected to office, and could have probably gotten there relatively quickly if I would have chosen that. And for me, I took a decision not to go down that path. Not because public service is not of interest to me, it absolutely is, and including elected office maybe at some point. But for me, that's not a goal. That's a means to an end. That's not a goal in its own right. The goal of being in public service, just like the goal for me of being the CEO of a venture studio now, is to be able to create impact and to be able to actually influence and to be able to actually leave a mark in the world, to be able to actually serve my community and my people if it's in public sector, or be able to create great startups that will then do a lot of good for the world and return investment for all of our investors, multiple fold. And in that sense, I felt at the time that even if I was elected to office the next day, would I really have the right skill set to be able to impact the policy from a policy perspective and to be able to make my country and my society a better place at the maximum level of my capabilities. And at that point, I said I had never built a strategy for an organization. I had never actually hired and fired a whole team of people. I had never learned a lot of skills on how to run a budget. I had never done all these type of things. And I was fortunate at the time. I was working for a minister that had done all these things. So he showed me what you could do. And he was an excellent professional minister that created a lot of good for our society in his role in the public security, Avi Dichter. And I was able to see that. And I said, if I want to be in a position that's a minister down the road or even further, I want to be able to do that. I just don't want to be there for the sake of being there. And I don't have that skill set, with all modesty at the time. Again, 10 plus years ago. And so I said, where am I going to be able to gain that skills, those type of skills to be able to actually have impact at the most senior levels and at the most impactful levels I could possibly reach? And so I went to the industry and I went to the private sector to be able to gain those, but chose a sector, again, with a deep sense of meaning that I could actually work in. So I wasn't just going, not that there's anything wrong with it, but I didn't want to go work for a video games company. And that just didn't have interest for me. And it wouldn't be motivating for me, even though there's a lot of great companies in that sector. For me, that wouldn't have brought out the best in me and wouldn't have motivated me to my best capabilities to do that, like I am in the health tech sector and specifically in the tech for bio sector right now.
Yeah. If I may, I think one of the things that I think I can pull out of here as a really good learning point is it seems what you did is that you prioritized what was important to you. That was the first thing, which requires a heck of a lot of self-awareness. You got to try a load of things to know what you like, what you don't like. And I think getting to a point where you can prioritize what's important clearly to you, that gave you the North Star of where to aim. But here's the thing, is that you're not someone at all that just sees how it goes. You're not seeing how it goes in any way, shape or form. You're incredibly deliberate, or at least you have been in the way that you told that story. You're very deliberate in what you're going to learn, where you were going to go. You were very clear of why you were doing it. And, of course, there's some element of getting somewhere and seeing how it goes beyond that. Of course, there's some elements of that. But it seems like broadly you controlled what you could control, and you're very deliberate with some of the choices and the decisions you're making. I think it's probably because you were so self-aware of where you eventually wanted to end up, and sounds like where you eventually still do want to end up as well, which, might be political office, which is exciting.
Maybe political office. Again, political office is a means to an end. It's not the end in its own right. There's pluses and minuses in being in political office. I think there's people that are very good at that, and that's their goal no matter what. For me, that's not my goal no matter what. I am extremely happy getting up every day and doing what I'm doing. But I do have a deep sense of understanding that our country, just like other countries out there, need good leaders. And we cannot outsource public service just to who's ever willing to do it. So sometimes some of us need to get up and step up and actually take a break from industry and go serve our public, and then maybe go back into industry down the road. When you're in the United States, where I grew up, it's very common and normal to go back and forth from industry into public service and vice versa. Again, when you're able to identify with the ideology or drive the ideology that you want to serve and the policies that you want to serve. So is public service for me an option down the road? Absolutely. Do I definitively say I will run for office or go into public service down the road? Maybe yes, maybe not. But it's definitely an option. And again, it goes back to the same three pillars that I tried to live my life according to, but in service with and work and developing my career with a deep sense of purpose. That doesn't mean a specific job or a specific position that I'm seeking out. It means that when I ask myself, do I want to do a specific position? Will I really be able to do it and create impact and be able to do something that is very impactful for a purpose that I believe in? Even I just had an option relatively recently in the public sector that was even somewhat public, so I can talk about without going into too many details, but I thought to myself, and I asked myself at some point, I said, would I be able to really do this specific public job that has tremendous influence potentially in a manner that I could actually drive policy that would create impact with the agenda that I believe in? And I studied it, and then I went to check out whether that answer would be affirmative or negative. And my learnings and best way of predicting was that, unfortunately, it was in the negative, and therefore it wasn't an option for me. But it was presented to me, and I took a look, and I didn't turn it down in its outright because it was a job that could have tremendous positive influence on the society we all live in and the future of our children.
Yeah, but it's interesting because you stripped the ego out of it. You stripped the how good is this for me? That's, not even come into this. It's actually just your sense of duty. Like, can I fulfill the duty of the role? Can I, am I best placed to do that, or is someone else best placed to do that in order to create the impact? Because ultimately it's the impact that matters. And actually, yeah, interesting.
Or could I do it the way I wanted to do it, in a manner that would actually create impact and be able to drive an agenda that would actually, because I have no interest in being a job just to have a nice title and say, okay, I'm in the job and that's that. If I'm doing a position, that doesn't mean it has to be my way or the highway, but it means that I need to be able to actually drive impact, drive influence. And as a CEO of my company right now, I'm still adherent to my board and I work for my partners that are investors. But of course, I have the influence to be able to steer from a management perspective the organizational culture and the way that what we focus on and the way that we do things. And if I'm going into public sector, that's something that you really need to take a hard look at, and not just to be there for the sake of the position and having a position, but actually, are you going to be able to drive a positive policy agenda in a manner that will create impact for our society? And for me, if the answer is no, then I'm not going to go and do it, because I don't want to be there just for the sake of being there. For the Peter Sellers famous movie, one of my favorites all time, being there is not a goal in its own right.
Beautiful. So with that in mind, and you're obviously able to create this impact now, as you say, as CEO of AION Labs. And what you're doing is you're creating AI discovery startups, and they are going on to make impact. So as a way of, I guess, explaining what you do at AION Labs, how does one create a venture?
We designed our venture studio based on a model that we adapted with our partners from BioMedX Germany, which is a model that, so you're familiar maybe with Christian Tidona. He definitely should be on your interview list. And Christian is a mentor and friend and partner of mine. We were able to recruit him as a partner into building up this venture studio, and we took his very successful research institute model where he creates research groups that address the biggest challenges in drug discovery and development, mostly in deep biology, by defining a clear problem and then finding and sourcing the best potential team to address that problem, a team of scientists in a very unique manner, and then mentoring them for success in a 5-year period within that incubation program that he has there at BioMedX in Germany, and now is open to campus in the United States at Yale. And what we did is we said, could we take those same pillars of connecting a huge problem statement, which any entrepreneur needs, together with the best potential teams we could put together, both with AI and technological backgrounds as well as biological backgrounds, with the entrepreneurial and leadership skills to be able to actually build a venture, and then to be able to support them, and the third pillar, with the best potential environment that will remove as many of the hurdles possible in a very high risk and tough area to succeed in, so that they can actually give them the best chance of success possible. And that's what we built here at AION Labs. We, together with Christian and all of our partners, we've been able to create this environment where we say, we start by a problem, we define a very clear problem with our pharma partners, so you actually have market validation from day one, that there's a need for the technology that will solve this challenge if it's able to actually solve, if it's solvable. And we then go out and find, in a very unique process, we crowdsource by sending out calls for application, find very talented people, and we've invested in also proactively identifying those type of people. So we're not just sending it out and hoping people will apply. And we reach out and proactively identify scientific and technological talented people in that specific area, invite them to test us out and to let us test them out. And we select the top 15 candidates that ultimately apply and fly them in, get to know them. If they're not Israeli, we fly them in, or we bring them in if they're Israeli. And we get to know them throughout a week that's very strenuous, outside their comfort zone. And we get to work with them with very significant mentoring on site from our partners as well as from my scientific team that we work with. And we get to know them, and they ultimately pitch to our investment committee at the end of that week, where the winner of that workshop at the end of that week ultimately gets a $1 million pre-seed investment to create a new startup. And once we actually take that equity investment and give them that equity investment, usually it's in a team, not just one person, we then go to the next stage where they get to sit in our venture studio. We're right across the street from the Weizmann Institute, one of the best scientific and technological institutes in the world, in the center of Israel, very well situated with some of the nice beaches down the road that we have to offer. And we work with them for at least a 2-year period so that we can bring them to a place that we can help them develop their technology in a co-development model, validate with the help of our partners that the technology actually works. And when it does, it's much easier for them to raise their next rounds and to continue to grow as an independent startup. And that's the way we've kind of built this whole environment and methodology, so that, again, we can make sure we're working on the right problems with the right people in the right environment to help them develop their technology and grow and continue to raise additional funds and help make impact in the world.
Yeah, it's incredible. And it's the structure of it that jumps out at me. My initial thought was, when something like this exists, in order to create those companies, it now immediately feels wild to me that a similar company would be created in just the chaos of the normal world by two people that already currently have jobs that are doing this as a side hustle, like a scrimping and scrounging for the odd introduction that might lead somewhere. Just like the inefficiency of that model versus the efficiency of what you've described, like this structured model that you just presented. It strikes me now, it's bizarre. It strikes me as wild that that is a thing with this in existence, you know? And I think when you kind of take the economics of that as well, and you go, what you're essentially doing is you're de-risking every point of venture creation on your, well, strip the jargon out of it. You're just reducing the risk at every point of people creating a company and a product, getting product market fit, getting to scale. You've basically just gone like, okay, what are the individual components of each stage? What produces the highest risk? Let's reduce that risk as much as possible. So, problem, you've gone, well, why dream up a problem? Why work on assumptions when we can literally just go to market, get them to tell us what the problem is? Why make it more difficult for people to then go and, put a team together and the rest of it and co-founders, and then let's create an environment where the best co-founders can find each other and meet and work together, then talent and team and all that sort of stuff. So I guess my question here, with that in mind, obviously this model's been developed and refined over time for what works at the highest percentage, I suppose. So as you've been doing this and all those different stages, like, what are the parts where you've seen this go really right, and where have you seen this go really wrong? So what are the most risky components of venture creation? What parts of this program are, out of something that was inherently risky, or something that you do now that has really reduced that? So I'm trying to, I guess, identify for people listening that are thinking of starting companies, where are the points of risk that they should be really, really thinking about things? Because obviously the learning that you've had through something like this can help really de-risk those parts.
So I think it's an excellent question, and I can give you a couple lessons learned that we've learned throughout the first couple of years of our operations, over two and a half years, where we've created 9 companies and really tried to learn from what works well, but also from what doesn't work well up until now. And a couple things I could say. Number one is the problem foundation, the foundation of having a good problem statement that's well defined, very crisp, understanding what the product will be if we develop it successfully, is something that is absolutely critical to get right before going on to the next stage of actually starting to build a technology. The approach that we take is not to build a technology that then looks for a problem, or build a solution looking for a problem. We do have a way of evaluating technologies to see if they address a problem. We call it a problem validation process, to be able to be attractive for those, two chaotic entrepreneurs that just develop something in a garage, but might be applicable to pharma. We do actually have a separate process, a seeding process here at AION Labs that we've developed over the last 2 years. And we've made 3 such investments out of the 9 companies, where we're in the process of making investments in that stage. Because we said we want to be attractive for ideas that address problems we didn't think of in our ideation process, out of a deep place of humility for where science is headed. However, that being said, we still never skip over, no matter how excited we are with the technology and the people, we never skip over the problem definition and validation stage, because that is something that you might find a great technology that could do a lot of good in the world, but maybe we're just not the right place for them to build their technology because we're not going to be able to support them. Or maybe it's something that's good as a research project, but not necessarily for a startup, and so on and so forth. And so that's something we make sure that we're always getting it as right as possible. That's definitely one key learning that we've learned over the last couple of years, and I have an excellent scientific team that goes deep with our partners to make sure we're getting that problem right, and then make sure that the entrepreneurs buy into it and understand the problem in the most crisp manner possible and where they need to drive their startup to head towards. The second part I can talk about is the team. So there's a lot of things you can teach. in that sense. Some are teachable in a short manner, and some things cannot be taught. So there's two elements I would say that we make sure that we're getting right. Number one is we're in a multidisciplinary area. So we're in tech for bio. We're in AI for drug discovery and development. And we might find excellent AI domain experts that are good people, great entrepreneurs with great leadership skills, and definitely great AI and technological skills. But we always make sure, and this is based on one of our learnings from one of our teams that wasn't able to mature successfully, and we had to shut down the company with them in complete alignment, is that there were two excellent AI entrepreneurs that ultimately did not recruit a biologist early enough in their journey, and then didn't have the right domain expertise around the table from day one. And that's something we don't do again. We will not allow to happen again. We said, yeah, we could fill it in with the help of our partners and with consultants and with our support as AION Labs team, that it does have some biological experience, but ultimately they didn't have that around the table enough from day one, and that was one of the reasons that ultimately it wasn't successful, and we've learned from that and applied that in our understandings going on with the other startups, that we condition the investment and having the right team from day one. The second element is on the character, and that's something I'm personally very invested in. That's something I don't teach. You know, we're dealing with fully formed adults. Always happy to help people grow and create that environment, but that's not my job. That's the job of their parents, to make sure they're good people. And so my job as a CEO, and I have this as a rule for everyone that works here in AION Labs, whether they're on my team or in the startups, is I sit down with the people and I tell them, if you're an asshole, you're not going to be here. So your one warning is right now in the interview stage. If you know you're the type that becomes toxic very quickly, that starts fighting with everyone around you, that is trying to fight for territories, and is going into internal politics and all the other type of traits that create a negative environment and a toxic culture, because we all know it takes just one person to ruin an organizational culture, one bad apple. That's something that I have zero tolerance for. And we have a very strict zero tolerance policy for assholes. And their one warning is in the interview stage. And if I get any whiff that they're that type that's going to ruin our culture, they're out the next day. And that's it. Zero tolerance. And so I give them that warning in advance, and then they can decide whether they want to be here or not. Because ultimately, the feeling that I have when I walk into the office every morning and like where I'm working and like the people I'm working with and what I'm serving, I want everyone in our organization to feel the same way.
That's incredibly important and wonderful that you call out so directly. I think that's good to hear. It is, yeah.
Well, it's part of being fair. I prefer to be transparent up front and just say, this is what I'm expecting. We could teach you the way to develop an algorithm differently. We can coach that. We can give you advice and what type of data sets to develop or manage. And we can help you through even understanding a business model and how to run a budget and all those type of things. All that we can help teach. But again, the job of your character as a person is either the job of your parents or it's the job of your psychologist and therapist down the road to help fix what your parents didn't do well. And other than that, that's not my job. I'm happy to help if they want it, but that's not my job.
Yeah, I think from a leadership perspective as well, the fact that you're saying that so directly, so early, and simply the fact that you're the one saying it, I think from a leadership perspective that you're putting culture so high on your list of priorities to protect, I think, it probably helps it be policed by those that might have a disposition in the worst moments of their life and career to act like that, to modify their behavior. But also I think, all of the other people that could observe that in others too, I think they might be policing that a little bit earlier, just because you're taking such a strong leadership role on it yourself personally and calling it out so directly at interview stage. I think that's wonderful. My next question is about, okay, so we've covered the kind of elements that would almost sort of prevent failure, but is there anything that comes to mind when you think of the ones that there are the good that pass, that create companies, but what about the exceptional? Is there anything that you've noticed, or is it case by case that there's just maybe one element that's exceptional? But is there anything to learn that comes to mind when you think of exceptional companies that you've worked with?
So you need to have a great team with the right people, good leadership, and an amazing culture with a sense of purpose. I think sense of purpose is something I would not deprioritize in that sense. So make sure that the mission that we are all serving and then the strategy and how to get there is crisp and clear and everyone can understand it within the organization. I worked at Teva, and the legendary CEO of Teva, Eli Horowitz, used to say that he wants to be able to walk into the campus and ask the security guard at the entrance what the strategy is of Teva, and the security guard will be able to sound it off in a very crisp manner as if he was a senior executive on the executive team. And in that sense, a sense of purpose, I think, in the clarity on the strategy and the feeling of belonging is something that's very helpful.
I think just to pause on that a second, yeah. So I think you're absolutely right. And the reason I say this, I think this is something that I could actually do better as a leader, because I think what some people don't necessarily realize that, starting companies or growing companies is that does take work. Just because the company innately has a mission to create this piece of tech that will help out drug discovery and do a thing and blah, blah, blah. Like, you can't just assume that everyone knows that and it's fine. Everyone works here because we're a company of purpose and we're doing that sort of thing. What you're actually talking about is a far more deliberate, again, getting deliberate, but you're talking about a far more deliberate way of actually tactically making sure that everyone feels it consistently. And I guess behaves off the back of feeling it, right?
So yeah, I can even say that a former CEO of Teva, Korschultz, who I had the opportunity to actually work with, and he used to have a saying that in meetings and in conferences where he would speak, whether it was 5 people in the room or 100 people in the room or however large the stage was, he would have messaging that was very clear and crisp, and he would repeat it time and time again out of the saying that it takes usually a human brain 7 times to listen to a message, to fully internalize it, and then to be able to repeat it in the same manner that it was messaged to them. Now, I'm not sure it actually takes 7 times, but I got the message from him. At least it was enough for me to hear that from him once, and to understand that you need to be very consistent. You can't change your mission statement and your strategy every other day. You need to have absolute clarity. And by the way, in a venture studio that's backed by 8 partners with government regulations and the support of biomedics that's powered by their model, we need to have absolute clarity as a coalition in what purpose we're trying to serve and what the priorities are. Are we about bringing AI technologies into drug discovery and development, strengthening the ecosystem that we're in, as well as building excellent startups? That's our mission statement. And return on investment will come from that. In that sense, if we're able to build great startups and take an equity stake, we'll be able to get our return based upon that. If we're able to really advance science and tackle big problems in a successful manner and bring these technologies in there. But our mission statement is very clear. And the one thing that our board has been excellent at is actually creating that sense of clarity out of all the different options so that we as a management team can help serve that purpose.
So let's talk about co-founders a sec. So talked about technical expertise, domain expertise, complementary skills we can talk about, all that sort of stuff. I love that actually you mentioned that, you're very honest, a learning point that if you didn't have someone defending the biology or, I say defending, perhaps bringing my own bias into this, like, not my first rodeo, etc. Well, yeah, indeed. Yeah, we're often defending the biology and defending the evidence and defending all of that sort of stuff.
It's interesting, actually, working in the tech for bio world, you get to see the very big differences between those that come from a tech background and those that come from a biology background. Those that come from a tech background, they think everything is programmable. So if you build the right, not that it's easy, I don't want to make it sound easy, but if you're able to actually understand what you want to achieve and then develop the right program and the right engineered pathway in order to get there, if you just execute on that, you'll get it. Biology sometimes doesn't work that way. So you can plan the right clinical trial with the right biological pathway and how to get there. And sometimes it just doesn't work. And you can't really explain it because there's more we don't know about the way our bodies behave and the way human disease biology works than the known. There's more unknown than the known. And sometimes it just surprises us. And I have a board member that likes to say, if I drop my iPhone in mathematical senses, I know it's going to hit the floor. In biological senses, it might go to the ceiling. We just don't know. It might surprise us.
So true. What does the typical co-founding team look like of the companies that you're building? Are there particular collections of technical backgrounds, biology backgrounds? Are you broadly picking the same types of people? Talk to me about that a little bit.
So I think, I'll start by the AION Labs team and then I'll go to our startups. So when I was forming AION Labs, I had the opportunity to be selected as a CEO, and then I needed to hire our founding team. And I was discussing with some of our board members that my biggest decision as a CEO of AION Labs from day one, probably for the term of however long I'll stay here and however long AION Labs will exist for the next 100 years, my most important decision is who's going to be the chief technology officer and my scientific founder and co-founder, really, and partner of AION Labs. So I went very deep on that and selected an excellent chief technology officer, probably the best computational biologist in Israel, and met with him 5-7 times before actually selecting him, and had a great pool of candidates to select from. And thankfully I chose the right one because he really complements. I'm not a scientist. So I've worked in the industry, but I'm not a scientist. And so my job, the way I see it right now, is letting him focus on the science and technology, and then me handling everything else so that he can actually focus on the science and technology, and so on and so forth. So we take the same approach then with startups. And so just to give you another example of a startup that we launched called Combinable. And Combinable was founded by a CEO, went through that whole process I described earlier, and was selected by our investment committee to give a $1 million check to form a new startup. And she, Daria Gulf, she's an excellent structural biologist in a space that isn't too saturated, right? There aren't that many excellent, experienced structural biologists out there that are truly brilliant. And she has a lot of experience. She decided to form a startup. And she said, okay, here are a couple things that I need in a partner. And we helped her to find the right partner for that. Someone that comes with a tech background instead of the biology background that she comes with. And secondly, someone that from a character trait can also help to fill in some of the elements that she felt she was missing. Again, as you said, James, out of a deep sense of self-awareness, and saying someone that can actually, present to investors and compel them with a good story. And so she's developed amazingly over the last year or so that we've been working with her. But we found her, and she selected ultimately a great partner in Dr. Noam Katz, who literally wrote a book on AI, but is really a machine learning and AI expert and never worked in bio. And she handles the bio side, he handles the tech side. They work seamlessly together, have built an excellent team to found the company with another 2 scientists that also come from a diverse background. And that's the way our startups usually look, bringing in technological experts from both the bio and tech side, or the tech and the bio side. The starting point is usually where it differs. So sometimes we start with the biologist and fill in the tech expertise, and sometimes it's the opposite. But ultimately, all of our teams will need both of those capabilities within there, as well as leadership and fundraising and business acumen and all those type of skill sets that are required. But those we can also help fill in and teach down the road.
Awesome. Can you talk a little bit about the types of companies, types of technologies, even types of problems that you're solving? Maybe even like the process of, well, how does this actually work? How does a problem get presented? What shape is it in at that point? And who then starts working on it? And how do you put it all together? And
so we are in a very focused area of technology for drug discovery and development. That means we're not doing medical devices, and we're not doing apps that can help you connect with your physician. Those are all great areas and spaces. That's not ours. We're very focused. And we are in the space that is from the understanding of human disease biology all the way through the approval of a drug, the R&D space of biotech. And we've segmented that into 4 different spaces in understanding human disease biology, so we can actually understand more about the diseases and what targets we should aim for when we want to help cure disease. And then secondly is drug discovery, that whole process of how we discover a new drug and how we bring a new molecule to the labs and then into preclinical and clinical testing. So to be able to make it much more efficient and discover new drugs using computational tools and data insights. Third is the preclinical stages of how do we actually prepare a drug and choose the right drug to bring into clinical development, both in animal models that we can make them more precise and more predictive and more accurate and much more efficient, as well as also choosing the right drug to then go into the clinical stages. And then the 4th segment is the most expensive segment of drug discovery and development, which is actual clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And there's a lot of different value points that we can actually across that value chain, just in that 4th segment of clinical development, that we could tackle if we choose the right problem statements and develop the right technologies for. And so we've segmented it into those 4 areas. And then we have a VP ideation. She is
What a cool job title that is. I know you're not meant to aim for a title, Mati, but that's quite a cool
great title, yeah. It's a title we actually borrowed. We have great colleagues at Team 8, which is an excellent venture studio in Israel in the fintech and cybertech world, and I got to know their Healthtech team, and they had a VP ideation. I said, that's a great title, and that's something that we definitely need here, and they're good friends of ours. And so when we decided to hire Sharon and offered her the job, that was a title that we landed on. And she's in charge of all of our scouting, as well as developing these challenges that we ultimately go to tackle. And so the process works that we have to get the market insight. So she and Yair, our CTO, the 2 of them really work with each one of the pharma companies with the support of the pharma R&D experts that are working with us. And they do it first, each pharma company on its own, so that they feel that they're in a safe environment under confidentiality obligations to bring out the top challenges that this pharma R&D group and champions want to actually solve. And again, this is the process that we learned from biomedics and that we're applying here. And they select big challenges. And then the 4 pharma companies, with the input of AWS and the 2 venture capital firms, IVF and Amiti, they then share these big challenges with each other. And then they pitch these challenges, just as challenges, not solutions. They pitch the challenges, the subject matter experts themselves, with our support, pitch the challenges to our investment committee that ultimately chooses which are the 4 that we want to focus on during that year. And what we require for a challenge to be selected is that it's very well defined, has met all our criteria, number 1. Number 2, that at least one of our other partners are endorsing it, so that we're making sure we're working on industry-wide challenges, not just a pet project of a specific company. And third is that anyone that wants to invest in developing a solution for that challenge needs to nominate an internal champion that will then work with us to select the right founders and mentor them for success thereafter. So we make sure that we actually have someone with a name that we know exactly who that is, and they're going to be the champion that will be the address for that startup that will be formed within a year to be able to develop a solution for. And they'll co-develop it with them.
Awesome. How do people in the industry who perhaps see themselves as one of your next founders or want to be involved in some way, how do they get on your radar? Are these people already in your network? Do you have like a formalized process around this? Can you talk to me about that?
So again, that's something we've invested a lot in over the last couple of years. First of all, hopefully they're all listening to your podcast. That those that want to reach out to us, we're very accessible. Just reach out on LinkedIn and both personally as well as to AION Labs or Twitter or wherever, and we'll get to know you very quickly.
You might get a lot of messages now you've just said that.
That's absolutely fine, James. No problem. And when you decide you want to form a company, we'll find you a nice apartment on the beach here in Tel Aviv or in Rehovot, and you're welcome to come set up a new company with us. No problem. We'll even bring the unicorn that's behind you there.
I'm interested. Excellent.
What we've done is create awareness for our challenges so that people can reach out to us, and for our models so that people can reach out to us. But additionally, that's not enough. So we've actually invested in being able to identify talented people proactively in a very targeted manner that have the right skill set, background, etc. And we reach out to them to make sure that they're aware of what we're doing and what we're interested in doing. And they're aware of the opportunity. And on a personal level, I spend a lot of my time actually talking to talented people. It's a lot of fun also, talking to talented people, very smart people, trying to look for those that have a spark of brilliance that we can actually bring in here in a more structured manner to come work with us. And that's something that we're very proactive in doing. And we have a huge talent pool that is only growing of people that actually want to be part of a good environment and doing good for humanity and working on big challenges that would have a huge impact if solved.
Yeah, you've talked a lot on this words you've said a lot on this podcast, the culture and environment, whether again that's deliberate or not, but it's clearly something that you care deeply about and something that you've really deliberately tried to foster in this entire project. And one thing that I've been thinking about a lot recently, and a lot of conversations I've been having with people and even personal life, professional life, is community. And especially because in the UK right now, in the US, we're in this like election cycle and everyone's turning to, is the next government going to come and save me? It's like, well, look, broadly, like the cavalry probably isn't coming. And this is the thing. And that's an interesting statement. You're going to save yourself, because I think one thing that is coming up for me is that as communities, we can care for and save each other as well. It doesn't have to necessarily be just the individual. I think the communities that we find ourselves in can do a lot of heavy lifting for our circumstances. And it seems like one thing that you've created here is community. One thing that you're, again, deliberately adding to with the talented people you're talking to, bringing them in, is community. The companies that you're then creating are going on to bring other talented people in to be part of this community. So you've got the pharma companies themselves with their problems and their ability to help, the VCs that have got their ability to fund. It seems like you have this whole community, like, I guess it's like a goal, a vision, like, to create these companies and create this impact, going back to the impact thing. And I think maybe it's just a comment really that I don't know if we have to just save ourselves as individuals when there is a community around us. I think it just gives us something that what you're doing is just giving such value.
Yeah, so community is very important. It's always been a very important part of my life growing up. And I was able to grow up with a model of my parents that actually helped create a community both within our tribe as a family. And our doors were always open to our friends and our community, and we hosted a lot and really created the right environment that people wanted to be in. And thankful to that example and being able to grow up in that example. And also being part of a community growing up in youth movements and et cetera, and have created social entrepreneurship communities. That's something I created with some friends. When I was at the age of 30, we created a young professionals community for the first time in Tel Aviv that caught like a wildfire, because once we created it, people wanted to belong. And we realized that we were hitting an unmet need of very talented young professionals in the community that didn't actually belong to a community. And what I'm getting at is ultimately people want my belief is, and this is something I want for myself and for my children and my family, is you want a sense of belonging and you want a sense of purpose and service of that purpose. And so that's something that we can help create here. And, here in AION Labs, we are trying to create this as a community, both as a team, with our startups, with our partners and their people who are amazing people working for them. And in the broader ecosystem, so we're investing now in enlarging that community so that it's a national community of potential founders in the tech for pharma space. And we've actually just launched a forum like that last month so that people can belong to a broader community at a national level here in Israel, and investing in that and doing events on a monthly or bi-monthly basis and creating that type of environment that we can help each other, because ultimately the success, even of my competitors and of any startup that is in this community, whether they belong to AION Labs or not, is going to spill over in a positive manner on the success of all of our ecosystem. So anyone's success within AION Labs and within our broader ecosystem and the Tech for Bio ecosystem at a global scale, but definitely in Israel where we are working, is success for all of us. And that's something we should celebrate. And we do that. You have to celebrate success. You also have to be able to embrace risk. But as a community in that sense, to create a sense of belonging and a service of a broader purpose, again, it goes back to our question of how do you achieve very aspirational goals, and how do you create alignment is by setting a very high bar and setting a very clear mission that we're serving, reminding everyone on that, to go back to Korschultz's statement of saying everything 7 times, reminding everyone of that on a periodic basis, and making sure that everything that we're doing is serving that with the best people around us. And if there's one piece of advice I can give everyone, it's surround yourself with amazing people, because it'll just make you feel so much better on a daily basis when you do that. And make sure you're not surrounding yourself with the toxic people. Detach from them.
Yeah, and that's it. That has to be an active process too. Mati, thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure. Honestly, I've really enjoyed learning about what you do. I think AION Labs, the way it sounds so wonderfully structured. And as I say, I can sort of see and feel in my mind's eye, like all the efficient parts of that, and, the chaos of trying to create a company in the actual world evaporating away into your wonderfully structured program.
Well, James, it's funny. We are in Israel, which is known for its chutzpah and known for doing very chaotic things and a sense of being able to break through walls and do everything that people tell you is impossible to do. But we brought in our partners from biomedics and our global pharma partners to be able to create that balance of creating some level of order within the chaos without giving up the chaotic elements that do have value, because you can't do something unimaginable unless you have some chaos there to help drive it. So we're trying to find that balance in the right way. Like we like to joke, we're always exactly 2 minutes late. So there you go.
Yeah, absolutely correct. My final question before I let you go, what is one thing that you're really excited by right now? It can be a technology, it can be a company, it can even be a certain problem that you're looking at solving. But what comes to mind when I ask you that? What's one thing that you're excited by at the minute?
So I am hugely excited. We have 4 new companies that we're in the process of forming at the moment. 2 in our seeding program coming out of top academic labs in Israel with excellent teams, and 2 that are in our building program that went through all of our Via Dolorosa, the workshops and the pitching and all the sleepless nights. They have amazing people on those teams. And they're not yet sitting here, all of them working with us on a daily basis in AION Labs. They will by the end of this year. And I am so much looking forward to get to work with them, because I want those people in our environment and being able to help them on their career and their journey, and setting them up as company, raising them funds, being able to sell them to investors and actually help them develop these technologies. For me, that really gets me out of bed and excites me every day. And other than that, my Cleveland Indians, or Cleveland Guardians as they're called now in baseball, have the best record in baseball at the moment. So I'm very excited. Maybe we can actually win that very elusive World Series at some point, sooner rather than later.
Don't say it too loud.
Yeah, I did. That was probably a mistake, but I'm not a big believer in jinxes, so we could just only, close my eyes and wish. So that's it.
Well, Mati, as I say, absolute pleasure. Thank you. All the best to you. All the best to AION Labs, to the Browns, to the Cavs, etc. All the best to everything, to everyone.
To get our hostages home, we have 120 of them that were very much eager to get home and to be back with us. And peace, inshallah, in our neighborhood. So, amen.
Mati, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, James. Thank you.